Hi, my name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerds Out. It's been a little while since I've last recorded a video. This past month or so has been a little bit rough on me physically, hence the lack of content on this channel. So I hope to put out a couple of shorter videos at this time, recording them back to back, but it all depends on how I'm feeling in this recording process. I might not be able to get in multiple videos like I would want. So first of all, I do want to touch on the fact that I did finish a book I was reading. I don't actually have the physical one. Actually, I'll wait because I left the physical book in my room and that's not useful. So I'll do finished books after in the next video. Okay, so then I'm just going to go into what I am currently reading and maybe touch on some of the books that I picked up, because one of my main weaknesses is picking up books. I love looking for sales, and so I pick up more books than I probably should. I just started rereading Persuasion by Jane Austen, which kind of gives you an idea that I finished Emma. I'll wave the book cover at you when I come back, but yeah. Not very far along. This is one of my favorite Austen books, though. And I just have, a few little notes here, particularly about Lady Russell and how she justifies going against Anne's desires to not go to Bath. It really is a big example of, characters who will just tell themselves a story so they can feel better about their decisions. Another thing, and people who have read this book, maybe they remember, but Elizabeth Elliot, Anne's sister, has a friend, Mrs. Clay, who's kind of a friend / companion type person, bit of a suck up, but they mentioned at the beginning of the book that Mrs. Clay, who is the daughter of Mr. Shepherd, who is, I believe he is the attorney for Sir Walter, should say at the beginning. A lawyer. So he is a lawyer for Sir Walter. But they mention at the beginning of the book that Mrs. Clay has a couple of children. Yeah, 2 children after having returned from an unprosperous marriage. So what I thought interesting about this is, especially during this time period, it looks like we're possibly dealing with a divorce, which is not terribly common at this time period. So it might be Jane Austen's early clue regards to this character as to what we can expect from her, which this is the first time I've really noticed that. And the other thing that I wonder, and I'm not sure if they mention it later on, I will be keeping an eye out for this, where are Mrs. Clay's children? She's going off to Bath with Elizabeth, and she's doing this and she's doing that, and as far as I recall, we hear nothing about her kids. She's either the worst mother ever, which she might well be, or she's just like kind of thrown them at her father and been like, hey, could you watch my kids for me while I'm off having fun? So that's something that I'm going to be keeping an eye on throughout this book, is if Mrs. Clay's children ever come up again, because I don't seem to remember that ever happening. So yes, this is, like I said, one of my favorite Austen books. It's probably, I want to say it's the shortest one, other than like things like Lady Susan, which is actually a novella. But of her actual main novels, I think this might be Austen's shortest one. Put this down here. So, other things that I've been reading. I've been rereading excuse me, Star Wars Dark Force Rising. This is the second book in the Thrawn trilogy. And I just have small notes throughout about different things I like about Zahn's writing. Zahn is definitely my favorite author in the Star Wars universe, in the extended universe, but he also is probably my favorite science fiction writer. And Star Wars is how I first was exposed to Zahn. I think I've mentioned that multiple times. But there's different things I hadn't really noticed before. There's a character called Paleon, and I noticed that things that Zahn does when he's writing is he just doesn't have flat characters. He has a character who, yes, he is lower down in the command structure, but he asks questions and he pushes back, even though if he had been dealing with Vader or someone like that, he probably would have gotten himself choked out. So it not only is a testament to this particular character's ability to think, not just follow orders, it's also a testament to the kind of character Thrawn is, where he can be ruthless and as well as brilliant, but he also is able to take feedback to a certain extent, which actually makes him, in a lot of ways, more dangerous a villain. And there's parts where, while Thrawn is brilliant, you can see at points where Thrawn is more of a zealot, where Paleon will bring a more human aspect to things. And the last thing I want to bring up here, which I thought was interesting, is there's a race of a people that Zahn created. They're called the Nogri. And what I thought was interesting, and something I haven't noticed so much in other sci-fi, like Star Trek, for example, is he mentions that, okay, there's this people called the Nogri, this is their planet, blah, blah, blah. There's something that Leia says in here that I find interesting. So, quote is, she found herself throwing short glances at them as they walked, wondering at the light color of their skin. Kabarak's skin was a steel gray. The Maetrox had been much darker. Did the Nogri consist of several distinct racial types, or was the darkening a natural part of their aging process? She made a mental note to ask Kabarak about it when she had a chance. Kabarak? I don't know. There's no pronunciation guide. Regardless, I thought that was interesting simply because I'm sure there are other sci-fi books that have done this, but this is the first time I've really noticed a sci-fi book that's gone beyond, okay, this is this people, but these people, like, you know, the human race could have, or like the human people, if you're doing Stargate, you could say the Tari. Sorry, I'm turning the nerd off a little bit. Regardless, humans have races, and so I thought it was interesting that Zahn wrote in the possibility even of the Nogri within their people having different races. So I just thought that was interesting, just because I've never noticed that in any other sci-fi book. And, you know, free feel to comment below if you have noticed an author in the sci-fi genre that's made a point of saying, for example, oh, these are the Klingons, but they have, you know, this race and that race and the other race within the Klingons, or whatever. I don't know if the Klingons actually do have multiple races within their people, but that's just an example. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. This is a book I've always enjoyed. Halfway through. But yeah, I can probably, if I sit here and read it, I can make my way through this book pretty quickly. The other one that I'm reading, and this is very apropos for right now, I am reading Inside the Tudor Court, Henry VIII and His Six Wives, through the writings of the Spanish ambassador, Eustace Chapoy, by Laura McKay. And I do have, I think I have a Kindle book by Laura McKay that's called Wolves of the Tudor Court, and it's about a couple of the Boleyns. I want to say it's Anne Boleyn's brother and her uncle, maybe her father. I can't remember. I want to say it's George, her brother, and it's about the Boleyns. I know that much. The Boleyn men in the Tudor court. So I have that one on Kindle. I really am enjoying the Chapoy book, which is why I actually ended up grabbing it in physical form. I am close to halfway through, I think. And what's apropos for reading this right now is this weekend. So that would be, let's see, today is the 5th, Wednesday's the 6th, Thursday's the 7th. So starting on the 8th, which is Friday, will be the beginning of TudorCon. Now, I am homebound, so I will not be going to TudorCon physically, but they do have a streaming option, which includes a digital goodie bag and everything else. I caught a sale for the TudorCon streaming ticket, so I'm really excited. Even if, say, I'm having a bad day physically and I can't watch them while they're live, I will be able to access the talks later, which is amazing. But yeah, Friday night is the beginning of TudorCon. They have some really interesting topics coming up. I'll try to maybe remember to talk about it next time I record, so after the weekend. But I feel like it's appropriate to be reading this during TudorCon. I believe some of the topics for TudorCon, I think there's one on Holbein, Hans Holbein, the artist of the Tudor court. I actually read a book on him too, a long time ago. I'm going to have to reread that at some point. And I think that there's another talk that deals with medicine or medical conditions in Tudor England, which that falls right in my wheelhouse. I love medical history. But regardless, it's going to be interesting. Sorry, this keeps pulling back and choking me. Tudor history was what first got me into really reading a lot of history. I started with Alison Weir. I think the first book I read might have been The Children of Henry VIII by Alison Weir. I believe it was that one. I don't think it was The Wives. I think it was The Children of Henry VIII. It was either The Wives of Henry VIII or The Children of Henry VIII by Alison Weir that got me into Tudor history. And then from there I went into medieval, and then, you know, the rest is history. Pun intended. But yes, enjoying this. I like Chapoy as a person. This is after the King's Great Matter. So Chapoy is trying to balance his desire to advocate for Mary and Catherine, but particularly for Mary, with his need to properly represent the goals of his patron, I guess he is considered the Holy Roman Emperor. He's also the King of Spain. So he had multiple things he had to juggle, and to make sure that those things did not conflict with each other. It was a balancing act. But yes, I look forward to continuing with this. I am very much of, and I know this isn't necessarily a popular take, a lot of people seem to like Anne Boleyn. I am not an Anne Boleyn fan. And it's not just Chapoy, it's not a new thing. I've felt this way about Anne Boleyn ever since I really started reading about her. She didn't deserve to die the way she did, for sure. I do believe it was a trumped up charge because Henry was tired of her. But I do think that she was a very vicious person. She could be ruthless, and she did everything she could to break up the marriage of Catherine and Henry VIII, because with Henry VIII, while he's definitely culpable, more than culpable, he's definitely culpable for what happened to his marriage, but Anne was definitely pushing behind the scenes because he had never shown any desire of casting off Catherine in the past. He had been perfectly happy to have the other affairs with Mary Boleyn and other people. But it wasn't until Anne started pushing that he even considered throwing off Catherine, leaving the church, all these sorts of things that really set off a very violent time period in English history. And I do feel that while there were other people who were promoting that, it wasn't just Anne. Anne was definitely an influence behind getting Henry kind of to go in that direction. She had just a lot of power just because she wouldn't give him what he wanted unless she got queenship on top of that. And I don't blame her for not wanting to be a mistress. I do blame her for throwing hissy fits for Catherine getting any sort of favor from Henry VIII. I think of the incident where Catherine had kept into the habit that she had for years of, I think it was mending. It was either mending or making Henry's shirts. And Anne threw a hissy fit when Catherine had given him one that she either made or fixed. It was just small things like that. And I remember just other reports, and I can't bring them up to my mind immediately, where she definitely wanted to bring Catherine down to bring herself up. And, I mean, one of the more little spiteful things was where Mary ended up being placed in Elizabeth's court, taking her, her entourage taken away, and she was added to her younger sister's entourage. Just little prods that Anne was definitely in favor of, if not an instigator of. Now, I don't have the same problem with Elizabeth, just because she can't be blamed for her mother's decisions. I have more of an open mind when it comes to Elizabeth, and I do need to read more about her. But I am not an Anne Boleyn fan. I don't see her and Henry's story as a great love story, as some people do. I see it a story of lust. I see it as a story of ambition and selfishness. Now, I also see it as Henry's part, besides the lust and the selfishness, and the ambition is on Anne's part and her family's part. But for Henry, I know part of it was, and this happened with his father as well, there was always in the back of their mind that the War of the Roses was not that long ago, and all it would take is an issue, a concern with the line of succession to set off another War of the Roses. So I do understand where some of the tension was with that, without having a definite male heir until you reach Jane Seymour's son. Edmund? I think it's Edward. But yeah, so I do understand where that fear was coming from. But yeah, I don't see that story as a love story. I just don't. I can't. But anyway, that's enough about Anne and Henry. Nah. But the other book I just started reading, and I've been wanting to read this. I'm excited that I'm able to get this in. And I picked up a few more of these books by this author. He tends to write art history as far as I can tell. But this is Michelangelo and the Pope's Ceiling. I literally just started. I do plan on, as a side quest, watching the movie. I can't remember It was either in the 50s or the 60s, I want to say, because it is in color. It's an old movie. It's called The Agony and the Ecstasy. And it has Rex Harrison as Julius II. And it has Charlton Heston as Michelangelo. And it's been years since I've watched that. But I think that'll be a good side quest with this book. I'm not very far along. All that's happened so far is that Michelangelo has run away from Rome because he has heard that Julius II does not want him to work on Julius II's tomb anymore. Mausoleum, actually, for the, way future. But he has heard rumors that he might be wanting him to do a fresco. And Michelangelo felt kind of insulted, felt like maybe someone's setting himself up to fail. Like there's another architect, sculptor. So he feels that this is a conspiracy where Bramante wants him to fail, and so he's getting Julius II to give him this impossible task. And he just doesn't want another sculptor with Michelangelo's talent to be working at the same time in Rome. And Michelangelo also claims some sort of drama about thinking that this guy was going to have him murdered, and Michelangelo's a diva. Was a diva. From everything that I have read, he was definitely a diva and a bit difficult person, which is what makes the relationship, the interactions between him and Julius II so interesting. Julius II was considered a warrior pope, and he was one of those people who was also very strong-minded. So having him and Michelangelo face off against each other, neither of them was going to back off. The only note I have right now on this book is something that I thought was interesting. It talks about the Sistine Chapel and when it was built. It was built in 1477. But what I thought was interesting is when Baccio Ponticelli, who designed the building, apparently designed it so that the proportions match exactly those given in the Bible for the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem, which I thought was fascinating. I had never heard that before. It makes sense because I think the Sistine Chapel is considered, or at least was considered, the Pope's personal chapel. Let's see. Yeah, it's called the Papal Chapel. So I thought that was pretty cool that it has measurements that matched what the Bible stated the measurements of the Temple of Solomon were. And what I also thought was interesting was the guy who built it also built it to be a fortress. So there are points where sentinels can keep watch, where there's slits for arrows, and areas where boiling oil could be poured down. And the reason I'm looking down is the book's on my lap, which I thought was interesting. And this guy, Baccio Ponticelli, whatever that's pronounced, I don't know. Anyway, Baccio, we'll just call him Baccio. After this, he went on to design fortresses. So, yeah, I just thought that was interesting. Just a little tidbit about the Sistine Chapel. But I'm, like I said, not very far in at all. It is an easy read. I only started it today. I'm on page 25. And I've got one of my bookmarks. This is Millie Paper Co. I like their magnetic bookmarks, and this is a painter one. I'll probably have to pick up more of these because I have been reading a lot of art history. But yeah, I just like them because I tend to drop my books and my bookmarks fall out. I also tend to, this is another one of their bookmarks. I have it back here because I like looking at the footnotes so I can flip back and forth without having to try to find my place again. So there's that one. I think that I will stop this particular video here, and then when I come back, I'll go over the books I picked up and the books that I finished. That'll give me a chance to grab Emma and see whatever notes I have written on that. Sorry if this feels at all disjointed. I am trying a bit of new things. I am trying to get those little half sticky notes and put them in the books where I notice that I have things I want to talk about so I don't miss anything. I know I saw somebody do that, and I thought that was a really great idea. So I'm doing that not only for my nonfiction books, I am trying to do it for my fictional ones as well. And I am finding that I am reading more mindfully when I do that, and that I'm getting more out of it, even if it might take me a bit longer to read. Oh, I don't have it here because it's on Kindle, but I'm also reading Thomas Sowell's, and it's written Sowell, if this is not an author that you have personally read. He's an economist, and the one I'm reading by him is called Controversial Essays. It does make you think, even if I might write notes on the note part of the Kindle, just as I try to work out how I think about some of the things he writes about. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, what he says makes sense, and I agree with him. The man is very well spoken / well written, and when he says things, it makes sense. It's logical. So I am enjoying his works. I will be reading more of his stuff in the future, but I don't have anything to show for you. I might have a picture of the cover on my Kindle. Thomas Sowell, Controversial Essays. These can be things that they're controversial, just like he says at the beginning. But I think these are conversations that are important to have, important to think through, while divorcing the emotion from it. To take something and look at things logically, because I think sometimes in these topics, we get all up in our feelings. But yeah, I'm enjoying them so far. I'm reading this slowly because these are things I don't just want to take his word for. I want to think them through myself. Finish this video here after reading his take on it. Hope that you got some enjoyment out of this. I do intend on going back to reading some of my fantasy books. I just have to finish a couple of the history books that I'm reading right now, because this quarter will be ending at the end of this month, and I have a couple of books I want to finish before that happens. So I will not be picking up some of those fantasy books, which include the Silmarillion. I was also in the middle of reading, well, the title goes out of my head. It's the other fantasy book I was reading, and I can see it in my head. Okay, so this video will end here. I will probably remember the other fantasy book as soon as I turn off the camera, because that's the way it happens. But I will be back for the next video, which will be recorded right after this one, even though it will not be released immediately after this one. Anyhow, thank you very much for joining me. I will see you next time. God bless. Bye.